Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm Joanna and today we're looking at unorthodox superweapons. Things that are incredibly powerful and can or do have a huge impact on warfare, even if they're not technically weapons in and of themselves. The poster child for this has to be the Starforge from Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. This was a gigantic automated mega factory that siphoned off energy and matter from a star, mixed it with the dark side of the Force and churned out unending streams of ships, droids, and similar things. Its builders, the Rakata, used its output to conquer hundreds of planets before succumbing to its corrupting influence. So it's not directly a weapon, but its ability to conjure up an endless tide of war machines while requiring no other supplies to make them is what makes it fit the bill here. Stellaris has some similar things in its megastructures that give massive bonuses to economy or production. The mega shipyard can spin out fleets extremely quickly, but it does need the supplies to do it, which is where things like the Dyson Sphere or matter decompressor come in. Individually, they don't really fit, except maybe the shipyard, but together they kinda line up with what the Starforge has going on. There's other things too, like the galaxy-wide intel that the Sentry Array provides, giving its owner perfect knowledge of what its enemies are up to. Pretty powerful, I'd say. There's also more direct superweapons in the game that don't count for this video, like the colossal planet killer ships, but these have some variations that might count as being unorthodox. One of them locks a planet in an impenetrable shield, and others convert the planet in some way. The aquatic variant pours out so much water it instantly turns a planet into an ocean. This is sort of borderline though, because this does drown non-aquatic inhabitants. But this capability of instant terraforming is what the Genesis device in Star Trek is all about, and being able to create a perfectly habitable world from a dead one is very powerful. It means you could ignore some pressures from expansion and maybe avoid conflict in the first place. Another borderline case is Operation Dark Storm from The Matrix. Humanity was losing the war against the machines, so chose to deny them their main power source, the sun, by seeding the sky with nanites, creating endless black storm clouds over the entire planet. A desperate move that meant the total collapse of the biosphere, but the machines avoided the same fate by finding a new power source. The question is, does this count as an unorthodox superweapon? Does attempting to starve the enemy count as a direct or indirect attack? Is this perhaps getting too philosophical about the nature of war? Possibly, so let's move on. Mass Effect has a few things that could count as this sort of non-weapon weapon. The Crucible, the giant MacGuffin in the third game designed to look like a huge bomb, works through the mass relays. And these are the real unorthodox superweapon in the setting. Along with the Citadel at the heart of the relay system, these are a massive trap set by the Reapers. They guide rising civilizations along the same technological paths and encourage them to set up a central government on the Citadel itself. All this makes it much easier for the Reapers to harvest the galaxy because everyone is dependent on the relays that they control. So the mass relays are a logistical superweapon. And this is a really cool idea to dig into, and there's lots of them throughout sci-fi. Stargates are another good one, but for different reasons. No one has any more or less control over the gates than anyone else, though access to them can be restricted. But that's not quite the same, unlike using a mobile Stargate to exploit the rules behind how they function. Since only one gate per planet can be dialed at any time, if you bring one along with you aboard your spaceship and dial from that, you can totally prevent the one on the ground from being used. Or just stick a hyperdrive and some engines on one that flies out to your target automatically. This example is then also turned into a more regular weapon by having a huge laser beam fired through it, but the gate itself is still blocking the planet's regular one from being used to escape. There is a more direct logistical superweapon in the franchise in the form of the Ori Supergate. There were two versions of this, but they both worked by sending numerous smaller segments through a regular Stargate. These segments then self-assembled into a huge supergate, enabling the near-instantaneous intergalactic transport of massive warships that began the Ori Crusade through the Milky Way. It's just genius how they can deploy a much larger gate through a regular-sized one, negating one of the major disadvantages gates have compared to spacecraft. There's more examples of these super powerful transport devices that allow someone to project power to anywhere they want. Treasure Planet has a portal that the pirate Captain Flint used to conduct his raids, allowing him to suddenly strike at anywhere he wanted. Star Trek's Iconian gateways function similarly, opening doorways across vast distances that allowed the Iconians to control their empire with ease. In Deep Space Nine, a rogue group of Jem'Hadar took over one of these, and with its capabilities, they could have easily sent troops to anywhere they wanted, either to take over the Dominion or to cripple the Federation. Speaking of the Jem'Hadar, in some way, the Ketracel White that was used to control them may be considered one of these unorthodox superweapons. Without it, the Jem'Hadar would die, and they could only get it from those that they served. The way the Jafar and Stargate depend on the Goa'uld symbionts is similar. But do these methods of control really count here, or are they something else? Another thing like this is one of the various ways of preventing or limiting reproduction that we see in sci-fi. Half-Life 2 has the Combine using a suppression field, Stargate has the Ashen's hidden sterilization jab, and Mass Effect has the Genophage. The last one there is used as a population control method, while the first two are meant to be slow, long-term methods of extermination. But again, do these count as unorthodox superweapons? These are much more direct in their methodology and aren't really used in war, unlike the ways the Jafar and Jem'Hadar are controlled and used as troops. Another method of control that absolutely counts as an unorthodox superweapon is the time dilation field the Asgard used on the replicators. Those tricky little metal bugs were trapped there and slowed down immensely, experiencing a year for every hour that passed outside the field. The Asgard did this to try to buy time to find a more permanent solution to defeating their great enemy, but the replicators managed to reverse it, leading to the events of the episode. Another example of manipulating the flow of time for an advantage is the Riftborn's special ability in Endless Space 2, where they do things like speed up time on their own planets to produce more, or vice versa for their opponents, or outright stop time entirely. To build on the time theme, time machines in general would be extremely potent superweapon tier devices. Being able to just go back and change things is probably the most powerful and dangerous thing we've talked about today. For some examples, just look at, well, pretty much any time travel story. And things get even more ridiculous when both sides of a war try to use time travel in this manner, as seen in The Terminator and its sequels. Can you think of any more unorthodox superweapons that aren't really weapons? It's an interesting topic to think about, both from a meta perspective, but also in universe. It's just something more imaginative than yet another generic planet killer device. Plus, this sort of thing can get you thinking about other stuff in war, like logistics, because warfare is more than just two sides smashing stuff into each other to see who wins. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate and spacefighter design reference books. Alternatively, you can support us directly through YouTube by becoming a channel member. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.